Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another Backlog cleared video. Today I have finally cleared my Eureka non-Masters of Cinema backlog. I still have a pile of Masters of Cinema titles to get through. I don't have a huge amount of Eureka non-Masters of Cinema, but a backlog cleared is a backlog cleared. Now, answers in a postcard, if anybody can explain the kind of process or the algorithm that makes Eureka release some of these titles, because again, they're a mixed bag to say the least, as you'll see as I go through the titles. They have 80s horror, they have 80s martial arts films, they have modern Japanese, Asian, Korean films. They have the occasional film noir. It just seems a complete mixed bag. I don't know who at Eureka is in charge of buying properties, but it's a weird mix and I can't really put my finger on what they're getting at, but there's some wonderful titles that they have released, and again, let me know in the comments which Eureka non-Masters of Cinema titles I should pick up, which ones are your favourite and the ones that I'm going to show, and let's just get started. And to start, as an example of how strange some of these releases are, it's the Blackula collection. Blackula and Scream Blackula Scream, not Blackula Scream Blackula. I love the first Blackula film. William Marshall to me is one of the best Dracula figures. You're completely on his side. He's just so classy, and in the end I find it actually quite moving when things don't work out for him. Again, this is actually a 3-disc set, Blu-ray and 2 DVDs, and you get a wonderful booklet as well. And an interesting trivia fact, Thalmus Razalala, who plays the kind of health inspector, even though he carries a gun, the kind of hero in the film, if you watch his performance in Blackula and you watch every single Samuel L. Jackson performance, it looks as though Samuel L. Jackson ripped off Thalmus a little bit. Again, wonderful prints, great to have both Blackulas, but again it just kind of shows the oddness of the Eureka non-Masters of Cinema. It's kind of refreshing. Obviously the Masters of Cinema is the kind of more upmarket version, and Eureka non-Masters of Cinema is just more loose and kind of genre based. So next up is Charles Bronson in Breakheart Pass, based on an Alistair MacLean book, directed by Tom Grease, who I think did a few Charles Bronsons. Kim Newman turns up as on doing an extra, as he tends to do for every label. Again, this is a Blu-ray DVD combo. Fun little Charles Bronson film. It is refreshing to see Charles Bronson getting love from boutique labels. Also 88 Films have some of his films. Also there's 4 Indicator Charles Bronson films now. Next is Cujo. This is a lovely special edition of Cujo. Again, they do a lot of care for these films from the 80s that perhaps other people may overlook. Cujo, this release is actually quite wonderful. There's a really long retrospective documentary. There's commentary. There's a lot more going on in Cujo than you perhaps might think. It's a really enjoyable little film. I think we all know what it's about, but it's also about divorce and motherhood. And again, it's a wonderful release. Again, perhaps a film that not everybody's going to enjoy, but here's another one, The Dark Half by George Romero, starring Timothy Hutton. Again, a really nice release, lots of work put into it. Again, this is a commentary by Romero, and Romero is one of those guys that it's worth listening to his commentaries. Again, there's a George Romero episode of Son of the Incredibly Strange Film Show with Jonathan Ross, which I remember watching way back in the late 80s. It was a 36-minute making of. Again, it's not a perfect film, but it is one of George Romero's more underrated films about the creation of a character that takes over the author's life. But we'll get back to George Romero a little bit later. Next we have The Dogs of War, one of my personal favourites. This is the exact same artwork that's on the Twilight Time Region A release, and very much like, it's pretty much exactly the same as the Twilight Time release. They have an international cut which is 118 minutes and an American cut which is 104. Obviously, me being biased, I prefer the international cut because that's more Christopher Walken. It's one of Christopher Walken's best performances. Again, this has a booklet as well, as he plays this really hollow, empty character who only really gets a glint in his eye when he's involved in conflict. It's one of Walken's finest performances. I did a random review of it a while ago if you want to check that out. Again, something completely different. It's 3 films with Sammo Hung from the 70s and 80s. So we have The Iron-Fisted Monk, The Magnificent Butcher, one of the greatest film titles of all time, and Eastern Condors, which is almost his version of Dirty Dozen in Vietnam. These are fun films, even though some of them, the tone's a little bit strange, because for example, Iron-Fisted Monk has a couple of nasty rape scenes in it and has some brutal violence near the end, but it also has that kind of Sammo Hung knockabout humour in it as well, and sometimes the kind of tone shifts quite dramatically in these films. I would say Eastern Condors is probably the best one, but the other two are fun. So we've got some 70s and 80s martial arts. And then the next one is Paul Verhoeven's Flesh and Blood. Again, something a little bit different. Again, this has really colourful alternate cover, booklet, and again this is dual format as well. You could argue, I could be wrong, but I think this is, like John Woo's Hard Boiled was almost an audition for Hollywood. I think Flesh and Blood was Verhoeven's last film before he went to Hollywood. No doubt somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is a commentary by Verhoeven, and again Verhoeven's always entertaining. He has that wonderful self-depreciating humour. Great performance by Rutger Hauer. It's a bit messy, but then medieval life is a bit messy, but again it's a fun film and it's a wonderful restoration as well. Next, again something different. It's The Incident by Larry Pierce from 1967. This is a kind of gritty kind of social problem film about attack on a subway. Again, kind of like The Taking of Pelham 123 without the bank heist story. This is about just troubled youth causing trouble. I would say it's okay. I wouldn't go rushing out to buy it or watch it again, but it does bring up some kind of socio-political issues that still haven't really been solved in America. An interesting kind of historical piece, I would say. Next, again, something completely different, one of their more recent releases, The Complete Inner Sanctum Mysteries with Lon Chaney Jr. This is 6 kind of short films. You have Calling Dr. Death, Weird Woman, Dead Man's Eyes, The Frozen Ghost, Strange Confession, and Pillow of Death. Yes, there's one called Pillow of Death. These are a lot of fun. Again, I think this has, it's on 2 discs. Again, another lovely booklet. There's a great piece by Kim Newman about Lon Chaney Jr. because he was kind of a tortured soul, always living up to the reputation of his dad. This has just got extras all over the place. There's commentaries. Again, Kim Newman really makes a compelling argument that Lon Chaney is so underrated and gets kind of overlooked. But these films kind of give him a chance to kind of show off. They were originally a radio series, I believe, and then they did films of them. Really interesting and fun. Again, historical document, and it's great to get them on Blu-ray. Next is 2 early films by John Woo, even though he's not called John Woo at the time. Last Hurrah for Chivalry and Hand of Death. Again, these are 1979, 1976. I mean, to be honest, these are okay. Again, I wouldn't rush out and buy them at full price. I would maybe wait for a sale. For me, they're kind of okay. But again, sometimes the plots of these films are fairly incomprehensible. But again, for a historical document, as far as seeing John Woo, there's some slow motion in it, but strangely enough there's no guns in these films. Though they're interesting, but again, I wouldn't perhaps rush out and buy them full price, but again, that's just my opinion. My opinion is not fact. Next is a modern film. Again, another example of Eureka just kind of bouncing around, and it's Lucky. I just did a fairly recent double take with The Straight Story featuring Lucky. If you want to go check that out, just a beautiful film with Harry Dean Stanton. Really a love letter to Harry Dean Stanton, who died fairly recently after the film was finished. Featuring a wonderful turn by David Lynch. This is directed by John Carroll Lynch, no relation. He is an actor who you'll probably recognise his face. He was in Zodiac. He was kind of the guy, the interview at the factory that might have been the Zodiac killer. But it's beautifully shot, beautifully directed, really moving at the end. And like I said, it's a wonderful kind of thank you to Harry Dean Stanton, and it's quite wonderful. I would highly recommend picking up Lucky. Next is The Man Who Could Cheat Death, with the always wonderful Anton Diffring, directed by Terence Fisher. This is an Amicus, not a portmanteau film from Amicus. Again, this is dual format with a booklet. So much fun, as most Amicus films are. Again, we're back to George Romero, Monkey Shines. Again, one of his underrated ones from 1988. I remember when this came out. I think I saw it in home video, but I hadn't seen it for years. And again, this is a wonderful restoration. You can never have too much George Romero. Again, this has another commentary by Romero, which I would highly recommend. Another commentary by Travis Crawford. There's another wonderful, pretty long retrospective making of Monkey Shines, which is really interesting. Again, another one of the Eureka non-M.O.C that I would definitely recommend picking up. Obviously, if you're a George Romero fan, you've probably picked it up already. Next is Night of the Creeps. We're back to kind of cheesy 80s horror films, directed by Fred Decker. Again, lovely package. And again, this has 2 commentaries and an hour-long retrospective. Obviously, it stars the wonderful Tom Atkins, who was in quite a lot of cheesy 80s horror. Again, this is a dual format with a booklet as well. Next is The Night of the Generals, which is one of those kind of messy films that have an all-star cast. It's 156 minutes. It's about Nazis, it's about a serial killer. In the midst of that, an officer who's going about killing women. It's Peter O'Toole, Omar Sharif, Tom Courtenay, Donald Pleasance, Philip Noiry, music by Maurice Jarre, directed by Anton Litvak even. It's a bit of a mess, but it's also kind of a lot of fun. Peter O'Toole gives another wonderful performance. Again, there's a booklet, just the Blu-ray. I mean, it's not perfect, it's kind of far from perfect, but there's a lot of fun to be had in it. Next, again, is another modern film, and there's not a lot of fun to be had in this one. It's The Painted Bird from 2019. Again, lots of 5-star reviews. Might upset some people. I think this is a good film, but I certainly don't think it's the masterpiece that some people call it. It's definitely going for that come and see dollar. It even has Alexei, completely forgotten his name now, Alexei Kravchenko, who was the boy in Come and See. It's essentially the story of a boy who gets left by his parents, a Jewish boy gets left by his parents with an aunt, I believe, to protect him. Something happens, he's forced to pretty much just wander through the countryside and meeting several people who brutalise him. It's the kind of problem I had with the film was the animal. It's almost like every animal that turns up gets killed or set on fire or tortured, but then there's really evil characters that we don't see what happens to them, but we kind of see what happens to all these animals, and I just kind of feel it was a bit unnecessary. Strange enough, the brutality towards people I didn't really have a problem with, but I just kind of felt some of it was just in there to shock and upset people, which kind of worked for me. It's 169 minutes long. It doesn't feel long, but for me, you could have cut 40 minutes out of it, just because there's lots of stuff in it that I just feel you didn't really need to have. But again, it's still a good film. I'm not bashing it, but there is a 125-minute making of, which I will watch to see if the director explains kind of the animal stuff. It was based on a controversial novel, and it took the director about 11 years to actually get it to the screen. It's shot in ravishing black and white. Again, it's one of those beautiful, horrible films. It has cameos by Julian Sands and Harvey Keitel and Barry Pepper, who has really matured into a really good actor. I think he's really underrated. Stellan Skarsgård, and they kind of just turn up and do these little vignettes. Again, I just feel it was obviously trying to get to that come and see point, but I just feel it's nowhere near Come and See. I mean, Come and See was Klimov's life's work. He survived Stalingrad, and you feel there's nothing in Come and See that is just there for shock value. It's a shocking film, and it's a grueling film, and it's an upsetting film. But I don't think there's anything in Come and See that feels kind of, oh yeah, we'll just stick that in to upset people. I kind of get that feeling about The Painted Bird. Again, if you're adapting a book that has this stuff in it, you don't actually need to show everything that's in the book. Again, maybe I'm just getting old, but I just thought some of the animal stuff was just a bit much. But again, a good film. I don't think I'll be watching it anytime soon. Roger Deakins on the Come and See extras on Criterion says he watches Come and See quite often just to look at the cinematography and get tips. And yes, the cinematography in this is really nice, black and white, but I don't think I'll be revisiting it too often. And it's harsh to kind of compare it to Come and See or anything, but obviously it's got the actor who played the boy in Come and See. You can definitely tell, Come and See and Ivan's Childhood are obviously two parallels, but it's nowhere near the level of those two films. I think one of the other issues is the little boy doesn't really give a performance particularly. It's more he just as a witness as he's being brutalised, and he just looks at all this stuff, whereas Ivan's Childhood and Come and See, Kurchenko and Come and See literally ages during the film and becomes an old man during the film. And to me, the boy in The Painted Bird is more just a witness to these events, and granted it's happening to him, but it's more just, yes, you can say, well, it's because the emotions have just been killed in him. Obviously at some point I'll watch it again, and maybe I just was so upset about the animal stuff that it kind of skewed my vision of it. The stuff with Barry Pepper, as wonderful as he's kind of adopted by the Russian army, there's a lot of good stuff in it, but I kind of feel there's also some stuff that irked me a little bit. But again, I'll watch it again and see if my opinion changes any. But again, another really nice addition, The Painted Bird. Again, let me know in the comments whether I'm completely wrong, or what you think of The Painted Bird. I think it's a divisive film and kind of has that reputation as well. Again, I'm maybe just getting a little bit old. But again, something completely different. Jackie Chan's Police Story 1 and 2. Again, this came out in Criterion recently as well. I don't know whether that was Region B as well, or just Region A. I'm not a huge Jackie Chan film. Yes, I'm not a huge Jackie Chan film. You may have noticed that. I'm not a huge Jackie Chan fan, but the Police Story films, we'll get to other ones quite shortly, are just so much fun. I hadn't seen them for years, probably since the 90s, and then I put them on and it's like I watched them last week, because if I remember correctly, like Channel 4 did a season of Jackie Chan films, the Armour of God films, which I have on Nova Media, and the Police Story films. All the memories kind of came back to me, and strangely enough, Project A 1 and 2 on Eureka non-Massive Cinema as well. Again, just fun Jackie Chan films. Again, the first one's better than the second one. They're not deep, they're Jackie Chan, but fun to have if you're in a certain kind of mood. Next, again, is back to a more modern film from 2016. This is Reborn, directed by Yuji Shinomura, starring Tak Sakaguchi. This is a film that is good. Again, it's about a sleeper agent who is being tracked down and he takes revenge, blah blah blah. There's really good action in it, but one of the problems is it's too long. The kind of climax is him and a couple of friends are working their way through a forest to the baddie's base, and dispatching all the baddie's henchmen, which takes way too long. I think it should have been like 5 minutes or 6 minutes long, and it feels like it's about a 15-minute, 20-minute section of the film, and it's just too long and you just get bored, quite frankly. It could have been trimmed and it would have made it a much more effective sequence as far as I'm concerned. Obviously you can let me know in the comments if Reborn's your favourite film of all time, and that's perfectly fine. I just felt, it's a good film, it has some wonderful moments, but it could have been cut down a bit, and I think it would have been more effective. Next, again, something completely different. Robinson Crusoe on Mars from 1964. This is a wonderfully colourful, obviously rendition of Robinson Crusoe, but on Mars. Nothing much more to say. It does what exactly it says on the tin. It's Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Again, I remember seeing this years and years and years ago. There's a commentary by special effects designer and historian Robert Shotak, and again there's a booklet and a trailer. A fun little film that takes you back to a simpler time. Again, we're back on Amicus for The Skull with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, even though Christopher Lee's just in a small part. This is from 1965. A lot of fun about the skull of the Marquis de Sade and the powers that it contains. Again, dual format and booklet. If you're a British horror fan, it's an essential purchase, especially if you're into the history of Amicus. Next is The Specialists by Sergio Corbucci. Again, dual format and a booklet. And this has a commentary by Alex Cox and an interview with Austin Fisher about spaghetti westerns. This is not as good as The Great Silence, which I think is Corbucci's masterpiece. It stars Johnny Halliday, and it's probably not as good as Django either, but it has some wonderfully perverse little Corbucci touches. It has, like a lot of the Italian spaghetti westerns that people kind of forget, a lot of them are kind of political and have political undertones, but it is a lot of fun. Probably 104 minutes, a little too long, but hugely enjoyable as well. So that's The Specialists, or Gli Specialista. Again, something different. It's a film noir, this Gun for Hire, with Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd. Even though bizarrely Alan Ladd's not on the credits in the front of the screen. You get a commentary with Adrian Martin, and you get an episode of Lux Radio Theatre featuring Alan Ladd and Joan Blondell and the Veronica Lake character. Directed by Frank Tuttle, not Frank Buttle. And it's a really nice little noir. Again, the booklet. If you're into noir, based on a novel by Graham Greene, it's a fun little noir, strangely enough. You can never have enough little noirs. And then we're back to a more modern film from 2015. The Tiger, An Old Hunter's Tale, directed by Park Hoon-young, starring Choi Min-sik. This is a beautiful film. I love tigers. The CGI on the tiger is pretty damn good. Again, it's also a film about Japan's invasion of Korea. It's just a wonderful film. Again, this is a dual format. Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful film. If you're a fan of tigers, if you're a fan of tigers and a fan of Choi Min-sik and a fan of Korean films, it's a no-brainer. 139 minutes, it's probably a little too long, but that's a minor gripe. That's generally my gripe about most films. Again, something completely different. It's used Cars with Kurt Russell, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and Jack Warden. It's just a lot of fun. Not particularly deep or meaningful. I mean, look at that face. You could definitely trust him, couldn't you? It's just a lot of fun. Nice set pieces. From 1980. Next, again, change of tack. This is Violent Saturday with Victor Mature, which features a wonderful performance by Lee Marvin. Ernest Borgnine's in it. Directed by Richard Fleischer. Yep, another Richard Fleischer film, who I seem to have quite a lot of these films. About a bank heist set in this desert oil town. Really fun little film. This has William Friedkin talking about Violent Saturday. Again, William Friedkin's another guy you could listen to all day. Another change of tack, we're back to a slightly more modern film. This is Takashi Miike's Yatterman, which is one of his kids' films. Even though there's obviously some undertones. I'm not even going to explain the plot. It's based on a manga, I believe, or an anime, one of the two. Yeah, I'm not even going to explain. You can look at the cover, look at the wonderful villains. It does have a great villain song. There are songs in the film. The villains do have this ship which has large breasts and rockets come out of the nipples, but again, it's for kids. The good guys have a giant robot dog called Yatter Woof. I'm not really going to explain any more than that. And finally, again, another different tact. Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain, which has a wonderful slipcover, directed by Sue Hark, from 1983. Again, this is another fun mystical martial arts film. Again, booklet. Again, just a lot of fun. I know, like I said, a beautiful slipcover. Packed with extras. There's a select scene audio commentary by Tony Raines, the wonderful Tony Raines, who gets around as well. An interview with Sue Hark from 2020. The original film, it doesn't actually have the time in it, but it's got an export cut in 93 minutes, which has a strange wraparound segment where somebody's transported to 10th century China. And again, it's got the Sue Hark episode of Son of Incredibly Strange Film Show with Jonathan Ross from 1989. Alternate opening credits, restored to original Western presentation, and archive interviews. Again, for me, not a great film, but certainly a lot of fun, and it does have the nugget that it may have inspired, or John Carpenter credited it to inspire him a little bit on Big Trouble in Little China. So there you go. That is my backlog cleared of Eureka non-Masters of Cinema Blu-rays, and you'll agree it's a bit of a mixed bag of genres and times and when these films were made, but they all have wonderful extras. Again, let me know in the comments which ones you have, which ones I'm missing that I should really pick up, and hopefully you'll join me again as I plough my way through my backlog. So thank you very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.